Hi, this is Bhartia, and welcome to another episode of TFR Newsroom. And today we have with us our regular Steve Me, co-founder and CEO of a new company called Ahana, and Deepti Borkar. She's also co-founder and chief product officer of Ahana. Can you explain the name Ahana? What does it mean? I do know the meaning. Just for our audience, I want to understand why you picked the name.
I'm gonna just say something quick and turn it over to Dipti. But I'm a big fan of yoga and I like Sanskrit. I used to chant Sanskrit, and so when Dipti came up with, she found it. She had to go through all these names, and of course, coming up with a name for a company is really hard. But Dipti, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I thanks to Stephen for the requirements. Had to start with an A, but I've been in data and databases for a long time and wanted to be a meaningful. And so when I thought about federation, which we'll get to in a minute, wanted to think about what visual I saw with that, and to me it looked like rays of the sun. And turns out in Sanskrit there's a word for that, the first rays of the sun, which is Ahana, and that's how we ended up with the name.
Now we got the story behind the name. Let's get the story behind the company still. What I mean, I do know it's about Presto community, Presto software, but tell us a bit about Stephen. You have been in the industry for so long. Deepti, you have also. So I want to understand that what need you felt was there, even either for the community or for the ecosystem or for the industry, that you felt that hey, no, we should start Ahana.
We felt that there's so much complexity still happening with data systems, and they need to be. It's a shame that it's still that way. There's a number of key technology trends, but this is also affecting how companies operate. And we think that this is a great opportunity when you have a different process that people have in terms of being more data driven, as well as the technologies and the way people are separating compute and storage. Dipti, maybe you can take it a little further.
The big data and cloud changes and trends that have happened have exploded the number of data sources. There's polyglot persistence, and there's just a lot of data that's spread across. Along with this, the metadata is spread across as well, which means that your star schema, which was one place where your catalog was, is now spread across many different places. And the database stack has just been split apart, where every component of the database has become a self-deployed, self-running piece of software. This obviously adds a lot of complexity because you have a separate query engine, you have a separate storage engine, and a separate catalog. And it's the larger internet companies have used a lot of the innovation that's happened in the open source community with Presto and other to deploy this as a stack, but it's not easy to use for everyone. And that's a part of our vision, is to simplify this for everyone.
And that's our mission, to let everyone have the same type of ad hoc analytics that companies like Facebook, who created Presto, Uber, and Alibaba, Twitter, they've been using this at scale, and that's what we're looking to do, is make that easy for everyone.
Since you mentioned Facebook and the emergence or origin of Presto, the Presto community, or if you look at the code base, it has gone through its own evolution. It has also gone through its own fork. So can you talk about that piece a bit so that there's some clarity about the projects?
Facebook created the project, and as many companies have open source initiatives, they have a big program office for open source, and they open sourced this back in 2014. They found that it was very, very useful for them, and they wanted to allow other companies to benefit from that too, and hopefully collaborate together. And so that was the original project called PrestoDB. And as time went on, last year there was a new project, or a fork, that came out, and its repo is called PrestoSQL, and that was formed with the original creators, who then made that fork.
If you look at forks in the open source community, the beauty is that is the beauty. Depending on of course, the license, you can fork the project. But as I talked to Linus, story was one that most forks do not succeed because you create a project for a specific reason. Sometimes, if the community is not willing, then you go and create forks. Sometimes, depending on the license, the projects also come together. So. if you look at these two projects, can you talk a bit about either the chemistry or what kind of problem they are solving for different users? And if you look at Ahana, where are you aligned?
Yeah, we're aligned with the original. We think it's very important that the people know that that is what's running at scale at Facebook, right? The fork is not. And I'll say that there's some differences in the way they're governed. The Presto Foundation was created by Facebook donated everything, so it no longer became a company project. They donated it to the Linux Foundation. And Linux has the well-known, highly successful approach of governance, open governance, neutral governance, and transparency. And so we were confused about this, quite frankly. We engaged with both, and we came to the conclusion that we would like to align with the project that's being run by Facebook. Now there's some other differences beyond just what the foundations are. Yes, there's a foundation for PrestoSQL, but it's not under the Linux Foundation, and it's a little bit it's hard to find out much about what that foundation is. And so there's some examples of why we looked at that, but maybe we can, Dipti, you can refer to some of the technical differences between the projects and how users can think about this.
It is a beautifully designed distributed system, right? That I want to say that whichever version it is, the original idea to solve this for interactive ad hoc querying is very good. It's very pluggable, it's very extensible, and it's nicely designed. Now, there's a lot of work to do to improve that. In terms of the two projects, whenever there's a fork, right, typically what happens is that there start to become some architectural differences in the way it's designed, right? And we are starting to see that with these two projects a little bit. As an example, there is an ability to the extensible API that Presto has, which is the SPI. You can very easily integrate any data source, right? Any new data source to it. But there is a fundamental architectural principle, which is, do you just use these connectors to read data in and then let the query engine process that data in the query engine? Or like databases have done over 30 years, do you push some of these predicates or the processing down to the database underneath? PrestoDB increasingly has started to push some of these predicates and this processing down to the sources, versus the other one where there's more of an abstraction. This is an example of, it's not one way or the other way; they're just different, and those are the things that come up when a fork comes out, and the question is going to be, is there a way to get this back together so that the innovation that's happened on both sides can be available to everybody in an easy to use way.
Yeah, so let's talk about that piece. As I was saying earlier, sometimes the forks also come together, merge. And if you look at this community, in most cases, either developers or user or community, there are a lot of overlap. So do you see that at some point the two projects might come together? What does it look like?
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort to do that. Certainly, having the creators of the project be involved with the original project and come back together is a really positive thing. And I'm a big proponent of that. We would like to make that happen, and I think the whole community would like to make that happen. There's confusion in the way that's been named, right? I kind of take the example of coffee chains. If you have a Starbucks on one corner, you get coffee from them, and then next door they have a Starbucks, and you decide to walk into there, you kind of think you're walking in Starbucks, but you may not have known that. And then you're getting a different kind of coffee, and they may be a little different in the way that they get their beans, right? We need to make that confusion get unified, and it looks like with our launch just this week, we have heard that there is a big movement to unify, and that's fantastic. And we think it's great that the PrestoDB and the Linux Foundation yet again has been able to unify communities that we've seen get split up before, like they helped with the container wars, right? There was a container where there was Docker and there's CoreOS. well, we didn't want, Khoros didn't want to have, say, a proprietary company who owned the spec, and so they competed with them, or they offered something again in open source, right? The coffee is free in both places, but you're getting a different kind of coffee you didn't know. And so CNCF was that. Presto Foundation, under the Linux Foundation, will become like that. And we think that's just fantastic. Now, to pull it together, there's a lot of work that'll have to happen. But we think that's going to be, and the faster we can pull it together is going to be better for the whole community as well. Dip, do you have thoughts about how, the technical side of getting that together, and any thoughts that you have?
That's another long conversation. You can talk hours about branching and merging and rebasing and all of that. But it's essentially there's two branches. There's a fork, and then every piece of code kind of needs to be looked at if the branches merge back. But that's the right thing to do for the community. And there will be a lot of people involved. Linux Foundation is the goal is to have one project and one community, and we'll do our part to help with that. Every member of the foundation is supportive and will help with that. It will be a lot of work. It's hard, but it's also the right thing to do.
Just like we saw the growth of Kubernetes once it became one community and one container specification, right? We hope that this will also be great. And we want to work together and invite, we joined the Presto Foundation. We hope that Starburst comes into the Presto Foundation and we can work together as the equal interest in the community. And yes, as you mentioned, Swap, there's maybe different focuses that we'll have, and we'll build on top of that. There's no reason to duplicate all the work, and so we ought to unify.
And we have seen a lot of examples, like OpenTelemetry is a very good example, where two projects from two different communities and companies they were merged together. Because the problem is that users, there is a big confusion because they see some value in each project, but now when it's come to investment, it becomes really tricky where to put in there. So they are juggling with two different balls all the time. And no offenses to any of these two projects, your goal is basically to help your users. That's why the project was created, and the user is developers. So it's better to kind of solve that confusion for users and just focus on what they need. So I think, that would be ultimate kind of good outcome of these two projects. Now, if you look at Ahana, yes, you did come out of stealth from, but can you talk about, especially Deepti, because you have been in this database committee for as long, that just the way Ahana was in the stealth mode, how you kind of developed it, and then you realize that, hey, now it's ready to go public.
So a little bit on the product side. So we are still heads down in building the product. The vision that we have is to simplify, provide an experience for the user and solve their problem, right? The problem is interactive ad hoc analytics in a spread out data ecosystem, right? We are still in stealth from a product perspective, so I'll only share so much, a little bit of the vision and how we plan to solve this. A lot of innovation has happened already in the open source world to try to solve this problem, right? It's because you should ask, well, hasn't that problem been solved already? Like, what is it that you're going to do different, right? And my answer to that is it's solved to some extent. There is a lot of code innovation that's happened, like Presto, right? Very well designed distributed system. That's one part of the solution. The catalog is a separate part. It's a Hive metastore. There's the transaction managers, which are now ending up to be Hoodie or Delta Lake, etc. They're different, and so for an average user, like you kind of asked the question, right? Users just want to solve problems and make progress. It is very hard for a developer at a company that's maybe not a PhD or a data engineer to put all this together and integrate it together. And what we want to do is use the best components and build something that solves this problem of interactive ad hoc querying to help with data discovery. Data discovery is going to be increasingly important in the future as analysts themselves become a little bit more data driven, more technical, kind of like data hacker. And so that's what the product is being built for. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what Ahana will be in the future.
As you said, the product aspect is still in kind of stealth mode. But for 2020, though we are in a very turbulent time right now, we can actually say what the word would look like. But do you have kind of a rough? I mean, I'm sure you have a very concrete roadmap, but you cannot share it. But just give us an idea. You did touch upon a bit, but where I can understand, hey, this is the milestone you want to achieve in 2020.
Yes, so it's important for us to have something available this year, right? And we're working towards that. We believe that we believe in iterating with the user base, right? It's the times have changed. It's different today, where you're in stealth for 3 years and you come out with something and then you ask for user feedback, right? It's a different world where user feedback is ever more important, and so having something that's usable is the milestone where we iterate over time, talking to users, talking to data engineers, talking to platform teams to see how this solves the problem, does it help, and what more we can do to make it better. And so that's the in terms of the approach. It's a slightly different approach to what you might expect from a tech startup. We really believe in getting this right for the users and make it a good fit for this problem.
Does it make it easier for you to stay in stealth mode for longer if you are basing your product on open source project? Because the project can live on GitHub for ages. You can have user base, you can have very good community. Does it help?
The community we are attached to and we believe in is the Presto community, right? It's one of the and we will evangelize and support it because we believe that is important, right? That is the core of one of the core elements of Ahana. And so, for that reason, we don't want to be in stealth for a while because we want to help the community. We want to evangelize it. We want to unify it. And that will help make more progress back for us. Steven and I, we've been in open source communities for many, many, many years, right? And the beauty of open source is if it's done right, not only does the community benefit because there's a lot of innovation that happens, but companies and enterprises can be built based on that too. And so we think it's a win-win if we work with the community, support it and evangelize it, and at the same time use the innovation to build something that to make something to solve a problem for our users.
And that brings me to Steven, because you have built a lot of companies before, and as Deepti rightly put, that you have open source itself is not sustainable unless and until there is a very strong commercial model. It's not charity, yes, companies take the project, they contribute to a fund. I prefer the word contribution than donation because you're still involved with the project. Donation is where you took the project and gave it away. Now you have to do nothing. I gave my blankets to a poor guy and I'm done with it. With open source, you are still actively involved. The reason you contribute is you want to grow the community. You don't want to do all the R&D work, So there's a very selfish motive behind contributing a project too. It's not a selfless. So, and selfishness is what is really essential for the survival of open source. So, Steven, from your perspective, you have built other companies before. Most of them were on top of open source. So in terms of Ahana, what is your go-to-market strategy? I know you may not be able to share a lot at this point, but still, tell me a bit.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Swap. I've been with open source businesses for 10 years. So it was Couchbase. I was a very early employee and built that, and then Luxio also, right? These are data products that are all distributed systems. And this point about contributing and taking and I think there's an element where we do think it's very selfless for Facebook to go and donate and then they continue to contribute to it. But their hope is that they will get something back later on as this community gets bigger and bigger. Now, that could be in the form of, now I can hire great engineers that were running a big deployment in some other company, and I can hire them too. That's how they think about it. Now, there's another element that for any successful open source project, they tend to form a company also, or there's commercial vendors like that too, right? So Google gave Kubernetes to the CNCF, and then there's companies like CoreOS and Heptio, and then they're now split between VMware and Red Hat. That's good for the community. That's good competition. They work together and they compete, and they also cooperate. That is how business is built on top of open source. And so the business models there are similar to what's happening in the Kubernetes space. There's approaches where some are just services companies doing Kubernetes services deals. There's folks that are doing proprietary versions, which you can fork and you can make proprietary versions. There's other companies that are making other types of services. And so we know these models very well. I think there's been an evolution from just, it used to be back in the day, you just you get some MySQL, you have it free, you want to get a support contract, you can call someone. That was the 1.0 version. 2.0 version has been evolving from there into proprietary subscriptions and those kinds of things. We really believe in open source, and we think that having open source as something that people can use is a great model for building a community. And then there's requirements that happen that are big enough for companies to be a part of, and there's segments across those. There's market segments across those too. So you're going to hear a lot more, but hopefully that gives a flavor to your viewers.
Awesome. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Deepti, for taking time out and staying down with me today and explaining more about Ahana. And as you said rightly, I'll be looking forward to talking to you more once Deepti has a roadmap that she can share publicly, and Steven, you have a business plan that you can share. Thank you once again for your time. And as I said, I look forward to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you'll be first to call.